Hello, everyone, and welcome to Easy English Talks podcast.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're diving deep into the IELTS exam, but not just the, basic stuff. We want to give you some strategies and tips to help you really stand out. So whether you are thinking about studying abroad or working in a country where English is the main language, or maybe you just want to improve your English skills overall, you're in the right place.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to break down your IELTS prep guide and give you the most effective strategies we can think of, even if you don't have a lot of time to prepare.
Okay, great. Let's get started. Now, you probably already know that there are 4 sections to the IELTS exam: listening, reading, writing, and speaking.
Yep.
And maybe you've heard about the academic and general training versions.
Right.
But what we really want to do today is look at those little things, those subtle nuances, and less talked about tips that can really make a difference in your score.
That's what we're here for.
So let's jump right in with the listening section. I remember when I was prepping for the IELTS, understanding all the different accents was a huge struggle for me.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from test takers. I mean, it's one thing to be able to understand English from a textbook, but it's totally different when you have to decipher accents from all over the world.
Yeah, exactly. It was like suddenly I was in a meeting with the United Nations, and everyone was speaking English, but with their own, unique spin on it. So how can we actually train our ears to be able to get used to all these different accents?
Well, the key is immersion. Think of it like learning how to swim. You wouldn't just jump right into the deep end. You'd want to practice in the shallow end first, right?
Right, of course. So what would be like the shallow end when we're talking about accents?
I would say start with podcasts or audiobooks, and ones that are narrated by speakers who have more standard accents. Then gradually you can start listening to things with more diverse accents, like the news or interviews or even movies.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of like slowly increasing the difficulty as you get more and more comfortable.
Exactly. But don't just listen passively. Try to really actively pinpoint the special things about each accent, like the pronunciation and the intonation and even the rhythm.
So it's not just about understanding the words themselves. It's also about being able to pick up on all those subtle cues that give extra meaning.
That's right.
And, sometimes I've noticed, even if I miss a word or two, the tone of voice or even their body language can give you a pretty good idea of what they're trying to get across.
Absolutely. Those nonverbal cues can be really helpful, especially when you're trying to make sense of an accent that's new to you.
For sure. Okay, so let's switch gears a bit and talk about note-taking for the listening section. I remember I used to try to write down every single word I heard, but I always ended up getting lost, and I'd miss important details.
Yeah, that's something a lot of people try to do. The best way to take notes is to be selective and really just focus on the key information that you'll probably be tested on.
That makes sense. So how do we know what's important enough to write down and what's not?
You want to pay close attention to the key words and phrases that kind of signal important points, like dates and names and numbers, and even strong adjectives.
Got it. And what about abbreviations or symbols? Would you say those are helpful to save time?
Absolutely. I always tell people to come up with their own shorthand system. That way they can jot down info quickly without losing any clarity.
So it's kind of like you're making your own secret code.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to use things like bullet points or arrows or diagrams to organize your notes.
That's a good tip. That way it's easier to look over them later and remember everything.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's move on to the reading section. One of the things that always kind of surprised me about the reading section is the variety of texts you have to read.
That's true. You might have to analyze an academic journal article 1 minute, and then a newspaper editorial the next, or a historical account, or even fiction.
It really is like a buffet of literature.
Exactly. And the real challenge is being able to adjust how you read for each type of text.
That's a good point. So how can we prepare for that?
Just like with the accents. The key is to get lots of exposure to different kinds of writing. Don't limit yourself to just one type of material. Push yourself to read articles from reliable sources, explore different types of books, and even read technical documents if you need to for your field.
So it's really all about expanding our reading horizons as much as possible.
Exactly. The more you read, the better you'll get at understanding all those different writing styles and vocabulary.
That makes sense. Now let's talk about skimming and scanning. Those are 2 techniques that I think are really important for getting through the reading section quickly and efficiently.
They can definitely save you a lot of time and help you find the info you need.
Right. So tell me more about those.
Skimming is kind of like getting a bird's eye view of the text. You don't read every word. You just look for the main ideas and the overall structure.
So it's kind of like just reading the headlines in the first sentence of each paragraph to get the gist of what it's about.
Exactly. And then scanning is more like using a spotlight. You're specifically searching for certain keywords or phrases that are connected to the questions.
Okay, I see. So if a question asks about a specific date or name, I can just scan the text to find it without reading the whole passage.
Exactly.
Those are great techniques. Do you have any tips on how to get better at them?
When you're skimming, pay attention to things like headings and subheadings, and any words that are written in bold or italics. Those are usually clues that something is important.
Got it.
And when you're scanning, see if you can kind of guess what words or phrases might be used in relation to the question. Like, for example, if a question asks about the causes of something, you might want to look for words like because or due to or as a result of.
That's a great tip.
And remember, the more you practice skimming and scanning, the faster and more accurate you'll get.
That makes sense. Practice makes perfect.
Always. Right. And it's not just about students either. We've also heard from people who have gotten jobs at international companies because of their IELTS scores. They're now working on projects that they never even thought would be possible.
Yeah, I can imagine how rewarding that must feel to be able to show yourself and everyone else that you can communicate effectively in a global setting.
It's a huge accomplishment for sure. And then there are the families who have used the IELTS to move to new countries. They're looking for better opportunities, and a chance for a new beginning.
Those stories always warm my heart because it goes beyond just personal achievement. It's about building a brighter future for your loved ones.
It really is. The IELTS can open up so many doors for people. It can be the start of a whole new chapter.
It's amazing to think about all the possibilities. So we've talked a lot about what happens after the IELTS. But let's go back for a second to something we mentioned earlier, choosing between the academic and general training versions. I remember when I first had to make that decision. I felt a little bit lost.
Oh yeah, I get that. It's a big decision, especially when you're not sure which version is the right fit for your goal.
Exactly. So for our listeners who might be in that position right now, can we talk about that a bit more?
Sure. Imagine this. You're standing at a crossroads. One path leads to the world of academics, with lecture halls and research labs and all that. And the other path leads to the world of practical skills, like the workplace and communities and everyday life.
Okay, I can see it.
So if that first path,
Right.
the academic one, is calling to you, then the academic IELTS is the way to go. It's designed to see if you're ready for university-level studies. Can you understand lectures? Can you write research papers? Can you participate in academic discussions?
So it's like your ticket into higher education.
Exactly. But if you're more interested in that second path, the one that's all about practical skills, then the general training IELTS is what you'll need. That version focuses on your ability to communicate in everyday situations, at work or in social settings or just out in the community.
So it's about being confident in your English skills in the real world. I like that crossroads analogy. It's a really helpful way to think about it.
I'm glad it makes sense.
So it's not just about the test itself. It's about where you want that test to take you.
That's a great way to put it. And sometimes it's not even about picking one path over the other. Some people might need to take both versions of the IELTS at different times in their lives.
That's true. Our goals can change over time.
Exactly. The most important thing is to know what your options are, and then choose the path that's going to help you reach your goals at that moment.
Well said. Now, while we're talking about choosing the right path, I think it's a good time to talk about some of the misconceptions people have about the IELTS. Things that might actually be steering people in the wrong direction.
Yeah, there are a lot of myths out there that can make people feel more anxious than they need to be, and even discourage them from taking the test altogether.
Yeah, let's debunk those myths. One of the biggest misconceptions you've come across.
I think one of the most common ones is that you have to be a native English speaker to get a high score on the IELTS. But that's simply not true.
Yeah, I know people who aren't native English speakers who've done incredibly well on the IELTS, sometimes even better than native speakers.
It happens all the time. The IELTS is designed to assess how well you know the English language. It doesn't matter where you learned it or what your background is.
So it's not about where you're from. It's about how well you can use the language.
That's right. It's all about your hard work and dedication and how well you prepare.
I've also heard people say that the IELTS is all about grammar. Like if you just memorize all the grammar rules, you'll be fine.
But grammar is only one piece of the puzzle.
Right. It's like saying that to build a house, all you need are bricks.
Exactly. You need the foundation and the framework and the windows and the roof. It all has to work together.
So in the IELTS, grammar is important. But so are things like vocabulary and fluency and pronunciation and being able to express your ideas in a clear way.
Absolutely. It's about the whole picture.
Another myth I've heard, especially when it comes to the speaking section, is that you need to have a perfect native-like accent to do well. I remember feeling a little self-conscious about my accent when I was preparing for the speaking test.
That's a common worry. But it's really important to remember that the examiners are trained to understand all sorts of different accents.
Right, so it's not about having a perfect accent. It's about being clear and fluent and being able to express your thoughts in a way that makes sense.
Exactly. Don't try to force an accent that isn't natural for you. Just focus on speaking clearly and confidently and in a way that's engaging.
And diversity is a good thing.
I totally agree. The world of English is full of so many different accents and dialects, and the IELTS embraces that.
That's great. And speaking of diversity, let's talk about another misconception. That you need to use really big, complicated words to impress the examiners. I remember trying to cram all these obscure words into my essays because I thought it would make me sound smarter.
It's tempting to do that, but it's important to remember that clarity is always more important than complexity.
Right. It's better to use simpler language correctly and confidently than to try to use words that you're not really comfortable with.
Exactly. The examiners are looking for you to communicate effectively, not to show off your vocabulary.
So it's about choosing the right words for the situation.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about something that I think a lot of test takers worry about. The fear of failing. The IELTS is a big deal for a lot of people. So it's natural to be anxious about not getting the score you want.
For sure. It's important to acknowledge those feelings and to find healthy ways to deal with them.
Right. So what advice would you give to people who are struggling with that fear?
First of all, remember that if you don't get the score you need on your first try, it's not the end of the world. You can always take the test again.
That's a good point. It's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And even if your first attempt doesn't go as planned, you'll still learn a lot from it. And that can help you do better next time.
And I think it's also important to keep things in perspective. The IELTS is just one test. It doesn't define who you are or what you're capable of.
Couldn't agree more. Don't let it get you down. Focus on your progress and believe in yourself.
Good advice. Now let's talk about all the great resources that are out there to help you prepare for the IELTS.
Oh, yeah. There's so much good stuff out there, both online and offline, that can give you guidance and practice and encouragement.
It's like having a whole team of supporters cheering you on.
Exactly.
So where should people start?
I'd say the official IELTS resources are a great place to begin because they're made by the same people who create the test.
That makes sense.
The IELTS website has tons of free and paid materials, like sample test questions and practice tests and prep guides.
That's awesome. So these resources can help people get familiar with the test format and the types of questions they'll see.
Yep, they're like a roadmap to help you succeed.
And what about prep books?
There are so many books out there that cover all aspects of the IELTS, from grammar and vocabulary to test-taking strategies and practice tests.
Yeah, I've seen a bunch of those.
Yeah. Some of the most popular ones are the Official Cambridge Guide to IELTS, and Barron's IELTS Super Pack, and Kaplan IELTS Premier.
Those sound familiar.
These books can give you a really comprehensive overview of the exam, and they have tons of practice exercises.
And they can also be a great source of motivation.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about the official resources and books. What about online resources?
Oh, the internet is a goldmine for IELTS prep. There are websites and apps and online courses.
So many options.
Yeah, for websites, I'd recommend checking out IELTS Liz and IELTS Simon and IELTS Mentor.
I've heard of those.
They have free tips and advice and practice materials.
That's awesome.
And they're also a great way to connect with other people who are preparing for the IELTS and share your experiences.
That's so important, to have that sense of community.
It really is. Yeah, some of the popular ones are IELTS Prep App by British Council and IELTS Word Power and Magoosh IELTS Prep.
I'll have to check those out.
They have interactive exercises and vocabulary quizzes and mock tests.
So it's like a fun way to sneak in some extra prep.
Exactly.
Now, what about online courses?
There are tons of online courses out there that can give you more structured guidance and support for your IELTS prep.
Yeah, I can see how those would be helpful.
Some of the big names are British Council and IDP Education and Kaplan International.
Okay, those ring a bell.
These courses usually have video lessons and practice exercises, and you even get personalized feedback from instructors.
That's cool. So it's a more interactive way to learn.
Exactly.
Now, with all these amazing resources out there, it can be hard to know where to start.
Yeah, it can definitely feel overwhelming.
So what do you recommend?
I think the most important thing is to find resources that work for you, for your learning style and your preferences.
That makes sense.
Try out different things and see what clicks.
And don't be afraid to ask for recommendations from teachers or friends or people who have already taken the IELTS.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about resources. Now let's talk about some general tips for success on the IELTS. Things that can help you do your best no matter what section of the test you're working on.
Sounds good.
First up, time management.
Oh yeah, that's crucial. For all the sections, but especially for reading and writing.
Right, because you have limited time.
Exactly. So practice working under pressure and learn how to pace yourself.
So you don't run out of time.
Right. Make sure you give yourself enough time for each question or task. And don't get stuck on any one thing for too long.
It's kind of like running a marathon.
Exactly. You have to pace yourself so you can make it to the finish line.
Now, what about stress management?
The IELTS can be stressful, but there are things you can do to manage your anxiety and stay focused.
Like what?
Practice relaxation techniques. Get a good night's sleep before the test. And eat a healthy breakfast on the day of the exam.
Those are all good tips.
And remember to breathe.
Yeah, sometimes just taking a few deep breaths can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
And I think it's also important to stay positive.
Yes, a positive attitude can go a long way. Believe in yourself. And visualize yourself succeeding.
So it's all about mindset.
Exactly. Your attitude can have a big impact on how well you do.
Now what about being prepared?
Yes, being prepared is key. Not just studying the material, but also knowing what to expect on test day.
Like the format of the test and the rules?
Exactly. Make sure you have all the documents and materials you need. It's like packing for a trip. You want to make sure you have everything you need to have a smooth and enjoyable journey.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Okay, so we've talked about time management and stress management and being prepared. What else?
Oh, I'd say seeking feedback is really important.
Like getting feedback from teachers or friends on your practice tests?
Exactly. Don't be afraid to ask for constructive criticism. It can help you figure out what you need to work on.
It's like having a coach to help you improve your skills. And finally, remember that the IELTS is just one step on your journey.
That's right. It's not the be-all and end-all.
Don't let it define you.
Exactly. Focus on the process and celebrate your progress.
And enjoy the journey.
Absolutely.
Okay, so before we move on to our final thoughts, do you have any other words of wisdom for our listeners?
I'd say remember that learning a language is a lifelong adventure. It's a process of constant growth and discovery.
I love that. So embrace the challenges, celebrate the victories,
Yeah.
and never stop learning.
And remember, you're not alone in this. There are so many people out there who are also learning English.
It's a global community.
It is. So connect with other learners, share your experiences, and support each other.
It's amazing how much we can learn from each other.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of IELTS preparation, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned.
Sounds good.
We've covered a lot of ground today. From understanding the different sections of the test and choosing the right version, to exploring effective study strategies and debunking some common myths.
We've talked about how to manage your time and your stress, and how to stay positive and seek feedback.
And we've emphasized that the IELTS is just one step on your path to reaching your goals.
Right.
So as you continue preparing for the IELTS, remember everything we've talked about today?
Put it all into practice. Stay focused and believe in yourself.
You've got this.
And remember that listening a language is a gift you give to yourself. It opens up new doors and expands your horizons, and it can enrich your life in so many ways.
That's beautiful. So embrace the challenge, enjoy the journey, and never stop exploring the world of English.
It's a world that's full of wonder and excitement.
Well said. I think that's the perfect note to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of IELTS preparation.
It's been a pleasure.
Now, before we say goodbye, it's been a really fascinating look at the IELTS with you.
Me too.
We've covered so much, from breaking down each part of the test to understanding how to choose the right version, and even getting a glimpse of what can happen after you take the exam.
I hope our listeners feel more prepared and confident now.
I think so too. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. We've talked about strategies and resources and even mindset, but in the end, it all comes down to one thing: taking action.
You said it. It's great to have knowledge, but you have to actually use it to make things happen.
Exactly. So to all our listeners out there, take what you've learned today and start putting it into practice. Begin with small steps, set realistic goals, and celebrate every milestone along the way.
Don't worry about making mistakes. It's all part of the process. Just keep trying and keep learning.
That's so important. And remember, learning a language is like a marathon. You can't expect to become fluent overnight.
Right. It's a journey.
And you're not alone on this journey. There are so many other people out there who are learning English too.
It's a huge global community.
So connect with other learners, share your stories, and support each other.
We can all learn from each other's experiences.
I love that. So on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the world of IELTS preparation.
It's been great talking with you.
And thanks to everyone who joined us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share the video with your friends.